Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Specify and Practice Group webinar. Our topic for today is coordinating drawing specifications and terms. Our thought leaders are David Stutzman and Louis Metcalf. Dave is a registered architect, certified construction specifier, and founding principal of Conspectus, a specifications and quality assurance consulting firm. Louis is an architect and certified construction specifier. Louis is a senior quality manager for Gresham Smith & Partners, a national architectural engineering, interiors, and planning firm. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. Your participation during today's webinar is encouraged, and we've allowed time to take questions throughout the presentation. Although attendee audio lines are muted, you may click the raise hand button to indicate that you have a question or comment. We will identify you by name and unmute your line, at which point you may begin speaking. If you're participating via streaming audio and do not have a computer microphone, you may also type your question into the chat box. Now, David, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're really pleased to see all the names on the list. That's kind of exciting. We've got a lot of folks coming. I think this is maybe a record attendance for David and me. And, you know, I want to stress that David and I both feel very strongly about we want you to feel free to use whatever materials we present. That, you know, if you can take these and use them as a basis for some training or whatever in your individual offices, please do so. Dave and I both feel like we owe the people who mentored us back in, well, a while back.
Watch it.
That we owe them. You know, we got a lot from other folks, and if we can pass on some ideas that are helpful, you know, that's what we want to do. And so we hope also that you will be free to participate in the discussion today, raising your hands and doing questions by chat and so forth. So we're going to talk today about the issues of coordinating drawing notes and specs and the issues behind the problem, and then we've got suggestions about some things that we might want to try. And before we begin, we have a polling question that might help David and I figure out a little bit what's going on with the firms that you folks represent. And so, Rob, would you please put up polling question number 1?
Welcome to GoToWebinar, web events made easy.
Okay, well, let's go on to the first slide then, David. Maybe Rob has some technical issues. We'll get back with that. David is speaking to you from the Garden State in New Jersey, and I'm speaking to you from sunny downtown Nashville, Tennessee, and we're just thrilled to have this large and august group to work with today. So we're going to start off with trying to talk about, well, what is a note? Next slide, please.
Sure. Oh, and Louis, Rob was having some trouble with audio, I see, so he's back on now. So if you wanted to get that other poll going, we could try that.
Well, let's go through this first, I think.
Sorry.
Here's a quote I found about what a note is, and I like that last phrase, to express technical facts or quantities. I recently read a science fiction book in which a design professional said that his was explaining to someone else that his job was to take ideas and turn them into technical documents. And one of the things that I have sometimes say to folks when I try to talk to them about writing specifications is to think of specifications as being a special list of terms or words like a lexicon or glossary that in itself doesn't have a lot of meaning, but you have to, like a regular English dictionary, you can write all kinds of books from the dictionary. You take the words that you need and you make individual statements, and so in effect the drawings and the notes with them are statements that should be assembled from the terminology, the language that's in the specifications. Next.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's again a brief definition of what a lexicon is, or one of the definitions, a specialized list of terms. Of course, the difference in specifications and a regular dictionary is that it's edited to only those terms that are used in the drawings. A few years ago, I got a set of specifications from a mechanical consultant that were obviously not project specific, and when I called him up, I said, what is this? Are you expecting the contractor to edit your specs to be project specific, to figure out what he needs and just disregard what he doesn't need? And the guy basically said yes. And so when I insisted that he make them project specific, he said, well, you're going to be that way. I don't want to work with your firm anymore. Over to you, David.
Okay, well, we made it through your first part there. Now, do you
let's do that first polling. Yeah, let's do that first polling question and find out who is preparing the specs for your firms. If you guys will vote on that. And then David's going to talk to us about why coordination is so important. And you know,
okay.
Just at lunch today, David, I was reading an article in Door Hardware magazine, and they were talking about maybe coordination is not the right term.
Oh, that's
because
interesting.
Coordination sort of implies that the two things are separate and different from one another in some essential way. And what this article was talking about, of course, just hardware specs and stuff, about integration. So maybe we should talk about integrating the drawings and specs so that they really are one thing.
Okay, well, that's an interesting concept, or just to maybe a different word to accomplish the same thing, where we've been calling it coordination all along. You see, we have the results of the poll. Looks like we have very few that are using an outside consultant. I'd like to talk to all of you that aren't.
Yeah, right.
Most of them are using a specifier, I suppose, an in-house specifier, or the project architect and engineer. So that's by far and away the vast majority, only 7% using an outside consultant.
And I think it's interesting, David, that about twice as many have a person dedicated to writing specifications as opposed to having the individual project and architects and engineers do their specs, about twice as many.
Well, and I like that. I like to see that because I think it's an important distinction. So why is coordination important, or integration is important? Well, Louis and I believe there are probably two really good reasons, one positive, one negative, but they're both equally important. We need to make the contract documents more user-friendly. Now, think about this. We as architects and specifiers are working on the project. It could be 3 months, 4 months, could be a year and a half or longer. And when we get to the end, we're trying to turn this over to a contractor to be actually to be able to estimate this project. And the key to all of CSI's formats and the documents and their manual of practice is really geared to finding information quickly. If we're following standardized formats, hopefully everybody knows right where to look. And during bidding, when we turn it over to that estimator and he has 4 weeks to pull together a bid, if he can't find it, the bid is going to be likely wrong. And if the bid is wrong, there's likely not to be a project. The negative, our beloved RFIs and change orders. We can't afford to really be putting documents out there that have inherent conflicts, because as soon as we do, we're going to be inundated with the RFIs. And as soon as that begins to happen, the confidence in the documents goes way down.
Also, there is a direct cost, David. In my firm, we've estimated that the absolute minimal cost per RFI is about $250. That the processing time, and it's one that just comes across your desk. You don't even have to look anything up. You just know the answer directly, fill it out, and send it back. But between logging it in, filling it out, and logging it back out, sending it to the contractor, there's a minimal cost of about $250.
Right.
And that comes straight out of the profit margin.
Right.
Especially if it's unnecessary.
And I'm surprised actually that it's that low. But you're saying that that's your minimum cost.
That's a minimum, yeah.
Yeah. My take on this is that on average, it's probably about 8 hours time for every RFI, and if you take an average salary, you're getting some real substantial money. We've had projects that are ridiculous with RFIs, and being able to avoid them is certainly a noble venture. One I can think of, just to relay the story, a large secondary education, a university level science building. They weren't out of the ground, were not out of the ground, and had 800 RFIs.
Goodness.
Okay, so Rob, we have another poll about RFIs. I think it should be your poll number 2, and if you could put that up, we'll see how what everybody is thinking of the RFI process and how many they're actually having to deal with.
And I don't want to drag you back to.
And anybody who answers never is dismissed from this class, and please send us the name of your firm so that we can submit our resumes. We want to come work for you.
Louis, no. They're not dismissed. We need to know their names, and they can lead this.
That's true.
Okay. All right. So we've got a good majority, 70%, are showing occasionally you have to deal with RFIs. That's nice. It's at least we're not the majority showing frequently. We did have 2% say never.
Oh, my goodness.
We've got at least one person out there that's never having to deal with RFIs. That's great. Share your secret. Okay, Louis, go ahead.
We're going to talk about why does notation go wrong. Let's back to the slides here. There we go. Well, of course, the main thing is getting ahead of our knowledge base, the decision base. There's just no substitute for, unfortunately, a lot of project architects and project managers want to see as much stuff on the paper as possible, as early as possible, and don't think about the cost that's involved with going back and redrawing. There's a guy named Fred Stitt that teaches at the San Francisco Institute of Architecture who, in his studies, his research indicates that over half of all the time spent on any given drawing is redrawing, and that's not good either for morale or the bottom line. Let's go on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of technical knowledge by the drafter. I'll tell you, anytime I see the term brake metal, where brake is spelled B-R-E-A-K, I know that the drafter probably thinks that brake metal is some special alloy like pot metal or Muntz metal or something, and does not realize that it means brake formed sheet metal. And this is the stuff that you just have to learn by experience and doing a lot of projects and by talking to crosstalk in the drafting studio to find out what these things should be called. Next, please.
Yeah, we hope that some of the interns go back to the format of the old drafting room, and that hopefully they're sitting next to some experienced folks. I was just in an office this last week, first time, and I was surprised because the entire office was set up as an open style with no dividers between individuals.
Yes.
And it reminded me of the old style drafting room. So it was obvious you could share information a lot more easily than you see in some set up as cubicles now.
The only problem is some of our younger folks have been known to wear earphones and be somewhere else with their minds listening to heavy metal, but that isolates them from their coworkers. Okay, now this one sounds kind of contradictory to the previous note, but in fact, just today, I'm doing a peer review project for a client, and I was looking at the drawings, and there was a note on there for a stucco soffit that said, the note read, high-ribbed metal lath. And when I looked in the specs, it wasn't there. It was a different kind of lath. So obviously this person knows enough to say that, oh, there are different kinds of lath, and put a note down, but it was not what was in the specifications and probably not correct. So you can't actually get ahead of yourself.
And guys, not to interrupt, we've got a couple questions if you've got a second.
Okay, let's take them.
All right. The first was actually submitted on the questions panel a while back from Wade Bevia. He was asking if he's the outside if I'm the outside consulting specifier, would that mean that my firm would be the specifier, or an outside consultant with the architect being the client?
Oh, as it relates to the poll?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that it really matters. We were just trying to gauge who was here on the call today, so we know what kind of direction to take with some of the comments that we are likely to make.
Gotcha. Okay, and then also we had a hand raised from Leah Roscoe. Leah, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now if you wanted to ask your question. Are you there,
Hello, Lee. Are you with us?
Yes.
You had a question?
No, I just submitted the definition of integration.
Oh, okay. Do you have that handy that you could read for us?
I don't know. I just pasted it in there and then deleted it. Let me see. No, I deleted it.
Oh dear. Did that show up in one of the comment questions, Rob?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've got it right here. I can read it off to you. From Webster's, integrate is to form, coordinate, or blend into a functioning or unified whole, or to unite.
Oh, that sounds like what we're supposed to do, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Very good, Lee. Thanks for that.
It does sound much better than coordination.
Yeah, sure does. Sure does.
Okay.
All right. Well, and of course the issue of the drawings and specs being done by different people. Back when I was a cub draftsman in the 60s, I went to a school that was a cooperative program, so I started working while I was in school. The specifier was this funny old guy who lived way down at the end of the corridor in a small room by himself and hardly ever talked to the drafting people except right at the very end of the job when they came in and brought him a log roll of drawings and said, here, write the specs. But that is, of course, an issue, is that if whoever is responsible for the specifications, if they do not see themselves as an integral and inseparable part of the team, it's less likely that the drawings and specs will be integrated. Next one, please.
Yep.
And, of course, the time can work on that, too. And even on the checking business, one of the projects that I reviewed a while back, it was for a large public entity, and there were literally dozens of reviewers who all wrote hundreds of comments that the poor design team had to deal with. And I, however, was the only person who looked at both at the drawings and the specs together. So I was the only person who noticed that the exterior wall assembly had 2 vapor barriers in it, that both the insulation was specified with a vapor retarder facing, and the air barrier that was specified was a vapor retarder. But if you don't look at the drawings and specs together, you don't see that. And so our little footnote there, what do we really believe? If we really believe, we need to think about that. And of course, here's a problem that I'm sure many of you have run into. The contractor goes out and writes his subcontracts on the basis of the drawing notes without looking at what the specs really say, and if there's a conflict, it's time for a change order.
Right. That one can actually be quite bothersome too, because if they are putting much more emphasis on the drawings, and some do, it can really lead to some awful problems.
Next, please. And this is kind of similar to that first one, is getting ahead of where the specifications are, that ideally the things ought to be proceeding in parallel, but they're not always. And so we have drawings, we want to get notes on them so we can identify what the heck it is that we've drawn, and yet the specs haven't been written to tell us what those notes should read.
Okay, but I have something to say about this one, and I just got a set of drawings today. This is for a project that's due at the end of the month, ready for bidding. The entire set of drawings, there is not one note.
Oh, that's interesting.
But the architect is quite proud of the fact of how much progress that they've made on these drawings. Now, there are 3 weeks left to get this ready to go to bid. And we're trying to understand what even we need to specify, because we don't even know what the products are on the job.
That does make it a bit of a challenge. That's why you get paid the big bucks.
I suppose.
Why don't you talk to us about what the guiding principles for notation should be, David?
Oh, yeah. As soon as I get rid of my Outlook isn't working message.
Well, that was you, huh?
That was me. I don't know what's going on there. Okay, the biggest thing that I see as a specifier, especially as an outside consultant, is that we really try desperately to get the spec terms and the drawing terms coordinated. And if the drawings are going to use simplified notation like types, and in the case of the glass and expansion joint examples by number, we need to make sure that those same terms are showing up in the spec.
But just today, David, I was looking at a set of details for expansion joints on this peer review project, and they have expansion joint 01, 02, 03, 04, so forth. So I look in the specs, and there's no mention of types.
Right.
There's
and what
a bunch of joints listed, but not by number.
Yeah, and what I like to do is if there are only a few of these, I would probably define it in the summary statement. If there are quite a few, then I'll rely on a schedule elsewhere in the spec. But we need to make it abundantly clear as to what each of those things are.
But kind of the goal of that statement was that, you know, really the contractor looking at the drawing should be frustrated enough to actually pick up the project manual and say, okay, what is it he really wants? And look it up, because some of the things you just can't write enough to put on the drawings.
And we want to note the drawings. I'll call it generically. You know, we want to call out what the material is or what the product is, not what it's made of, not what it does, not how it's made, not necessarily how it's installed. Well, that's why the spec is there. We need to keep that distinction between the drawings and the specs, that the drawings are there to identify what it is and where it goes and the size of what it is, but not the detail of what the makeup of the product is or how to fabricate it. And this one is maybe a takeoff on the prior one. We want to distinguish between the materials and the components. If we have a component, in this case a curtain wall flashing, that's specific to a curtain wall, and the curtain wall flashing is probably installed or specified with the curtain wall because it's part of the assembly, we want to try to lead the contractor to be able to find the material in the specification. So being able to label it and associate it with the system is a big help to the contractor in pointing them in the right direction to find it in the spec. I don't know where you found this photo, Russ. And I don't know how many people are going to recognize them. But here we go. Be terse. You know, we can keep the notes short. They don't have to be an essay, as long as they're recognizable and as long as they're tied directly to the spec. That's all the contractor is going to need.
And only note what's important to the context. There's no reason to explain a bunch of stuff that it's obvious what it is. You don't have to point to glass and say glass in a section. Most people can read that and see it, because you're not going to identify the glass type in the section. Well, David and I have tried to come up with some positive suggestions, some things that might try, and so we're going to go through these today. David, why don't you start with this?
Yeah.
I'll start. Yeah, you start with this one.
This one is my baby. Yep.
That's right.
Table of contents. As a specifier, it's the first thing that I do for a project. I don't care how many times the table of contents changes, but gosh, I need a table of contents because it's my map as to how to get through the project.
And a lot of the section titles are very useful as drawing notes, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Because when I say table of contents, ours is usually not just a section number and a title, but it's also a list of major things that are going to occur in each section, and we actually do use that to try to coordinate with the drawings.
The section includes list can also be a place where you can identify, use the terms that are used on, that should be used in drawing notations of what products are in that section, and use that as a way of organizing your, coordinating your notes.
Right, and I like to expand the summary section. I like to do something more than most of the commercial masters like Master Spec and Spec Text do. We like to give the contractor more than just a list of specific products that might be included in the section, and give them some clue as to how they're used. Open up a masonry section, and if you see the list of just brick, block, you know, how is this stuff actually used?
Oh, you mean like location in the building?
It could be. I mean, CMU interior partitions in the basement and utility spaces could be a great help to the contractor.
Indeed. Another great source for names of products are Part 2 article titles. Now, you may have to, this also says something about the way that you may want to rewrite or organize your spec masters for your office so that you do have article titles that are connected with it. An example might be the architectural woodwork section, and if you have separate articles for flush wood paneling, flush laminate paneling, stile and rail paneling, and so forth, all of that list, those terms can be used as drawing notes.
And Lewis, with the Part 2 article titles, do you repeat those back in the summary?
It depends. Yeah, generally.
Because if they do appear in the summary, it also then gives whoever's reading the spec a clue as to the context of what they should expect to find in Part 2.
Right, because what we're all about is trying to help the contractor find the information as quickly as possible, and also my CA staff to help them find what they need when they need it.
You mean you rely on somebody else? You don't go out sloshing around in the mud yourself?
Unfortunately, they usually keep me chained to the desk and only release me at quitting time.
We have a few more comments here as well, guys.
I think sometimes I'm also viewed as inside man at the skunk works. Now here's a radical idea. If the building code, I see drawings all the time that refer to the air barrier. Most building inspectors or planning examiners could care less if your building has an air barrier. What they want to know is, does it have what the National Building Code calls a weather-resistive barrier, which, as part of its function, resists not only moisture, but is also an air barrier. So use building code terms instead of some idiosyncratic term that your drafters think up.
Right, and that could certainly go a long ways to simplifying code review, because if the code reviewers are finding terms that they know from the code, they're going to understand the spec a little bit better and the drawings a little bit better.
Yeah, it's one less nasty note that you get before you get your permit that you have to explain.
And before you guys move forward too much, we have some more comments in the.
Good.
That's great. Good.
And one relates to the, I guess, identifiers that you were talking about earlier. Is from Jim Stewart. He says, Dave, I like to call these designations, and he gives the examples CW, SF, and DCMU, and et cetera, like that, and then just work from a standard list for those identifiers.
Right, and that's a great idea, because if we can get standardized on those abbreviations for the materials, then hopefully all of the places on the drawing where they're used are going to be consistent, and then we can tie them directly to the spec without much difficulty.
And when we use a TLA, a three-letter acronym or something like that, I like to put that abbreviation. I will, for example, if it's concrete masonry unit, I'll put that as an article heading, and then in parenthesis I'll put CMU, so there's no doubt that that's exactly what that means. Good comment. Thank you.
Right. Anything else, Rob?
We had another from Corinne Golding, who said, I know that my message about consistency of terminology is getting through when the CAD techs come to me and say, what are you calling this in the spec?
Very well done. Good. That's exactly right.
Yeah, you must have done something right at that point. That's great.
It also talks a lot about personal relationships. I mean, obviously, this is not just a hierarchical thing, but this is someone has developed a level of trust and respect, and well done. Well done.
And then one other question from Leah Rosca. She's asking, you repeat every article title in the summary?
Not necessarily. It depends upon the section. Again, it's a matter of what's effective to communicate for that given section.
Yeah. And Lee, what I tried to get through on that is I'm looking to identify those terms that are found on the drawings.
We wouldn't put fabrication, for example, in the section includes list, because we all know that, or painting or something.
Right, and sometimes I know that the commercial masters, they'll even get down to listing some of the accessory items in the summary article. I usually find myself deleting those.
Yeah, the nuts, bolts, and screws.
Right, so that I keep that summary to be what someone would expect to find noted on a drawing. So, and I think that goes to this using the industry standard terms. The only difficulty I have with this is that if we look at some of the reference standards that we use, whether it's ASTM, ACI, or any of the others, they tend to get some of the names that they assign to products to be quite lengthy. And from that standpoint, I think it's a little bit of a disservice expecting that somebody is going to use that exact same designation on a drawing and expect it to be consistent. I think
That's true.
I think we need to look at it, what's the meaning that we actually have to convey, and let's get it down to that minimum meaning to make sure that we're not dragging on these terms.
One of the things that I encourage our folks to do is to distinguish between cold form metal framing, which can be abbreviated CFMF, as an industry standard term for the structural steel studs that are specified in Division 5, as opposed to the non-structural stud framing that's specified in Division 9. And again, if you use terms from the Steel Stud Manufacturers Association and other industry groups, that can go a long way towards helping you standardize your terminology and make it really clear to everybody.
And probably end up with it being consistent with the spec.
Absolutely.
Okay. Lewis, I think this one's your baby.
No, actually, you invented that one. I'll blame that on you.
Oh, okay. This goes back to the table of contents that I discussed earlier, and we do integrate this with the table of contents. And seeing as how we're working with many different firms, we actually have separate lists for individual firms trying to help capture what they typically are using on the drawings so that we have a basis when we actually begin the spec. And if we have listed in the contents the basic elements that go into each specification section, I believe that that becomes a great roadmap for creating this list and eventually a keynote list.
One of the firms I worked for back in the 60s, the drafters were not allowed to put any notes on the drawings. They drew all the details, wall section, and so forth, and a single person went through and redlined all the notes that were appropriate. That's maybe, and then the drafters transcribed those notes, which was a good learning experience. That's probably a bit extreme, but certainly if you start out with an examples wall section or two and a couple of details and put the notes down and then give those to the drafting team, they can quickly pick up the standardized terminology, and you'll have a greater chance of uniformity.
I want to borrow a concept from one of our guests on the call today. I see Bob Johnson is out there with us, and Bob, if you want to chime in on this, that would be great. But one way you can help try to avoid some of this inconsistency and some of the extraneous notation is actually think of drawings in using schedules. Just as you would do a partition schedule, you can apply that same kind of concept to other building construction, to the exterior wall, to the footing.
I have seen sets of drawings. They have exterior wall types just like the interior partition types schedule.
Right. So you can note it once and then just identify it as exterior wall 1, exterior wall 2, and not have to worry about repeating those notes multiple times.
And even use the uniformat number.
Yep.
Let's do our next polling question. One idea, of course, is to, this is something we don't teach in school. So how do we get this through to our staff? And do we ever have in-house training on how to write drawing notes? Do we coach people? Is it all, is it one-on-one, or do we actually have some little workshops? The firm I worked for previously, where I was the specifier for the firm, I did these notation workshops on a regular basis about every, not every other year or every 18 months, because of course we'd have new staff coming on board. So, have we got some, how are we coming on our responses here?
Well, we've got almost everyone having voted here, and it looks like we have the substantial majority is there's no training going on.
Aha. Well, okay, gang, you can, this presentation that David and I are doing will be made available to you through CSI. You can download free of charge. It's not copyrighted, so get out there and organize some workshops to have a lunch and learn with your folks.
And we have a few more comments if you have it.
I think it's your turn, David.
Yeah, well, Rob says he has a few more comments.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it.
One that I think is pretty comical from Marilyn Smith. She writes, when leading training classes on these subjects, one of my favorite sayings is, "This is not a creative writing class."
That's right.
That's true. We're not writing essays. We're not writing short stories. We're trying to do very technical, detailed information, and it's.
And actually, we like short, choppy sentences, unlike what your fourth grade teacher told you.
Right. Were there more, Rob?
Mm-hmm. Yep. On a more serious note, though, John Horner makes a good point. He says, unless a drawing term is exactly the same as used in the specs, it is not the same thing. For example, quote, metal roofing on the drawings is not the product. Pre-finished metal roofing in the specs, regardless of intent. Right. I think is
well, here we get to that distinction that we tried to draw earlier between the basic material and a system. And what I encourage folks to do, and maybe not everybody would agree with this, is that I would have the leader point to the metal roofing and maybe even call it manufactured metal roofing system or manufactured metal roofing, to imply that it is a system and it has multiple components that go with it. We're not necessarily identifying the individual, this is the roofing panel and this is the trim panel and so forth. Anyway, I don't know if that helps.
Right. And I would even go so far as if we can just get it, the basic material and the basic function, in this case, just get it down to metal roofing. And if you have more than one, then we can begin to look at calling it out by types.
And I'm getting a lot of notifications here that people are having a problem hearing me. I've got everything kind of cranked up now, and I'm not sure what the problems are.
You're a little low to me, too.
It's weird. It's echoing like crazy in my own ears. Can you guys see Bob Johnson's point that he raised there? Because you may want to read that if the attendees can't hear me read it. It's probably a good point.
Okay, let me see if I can get to that. Bob Johnson. Okay, here it is. Shouldn't we try to establish a standard for terminology that integrates drawings and specs? If we got all the master spec providers to participate and agree to use the agreed upon terminology, we would make a big step towards consensus terminology across the industry. Bob, you and I have had this discussion before, I know, and I know this is one of your crusades with AIA and CSI, master spec, spec text and all, and I agree with you totally. To me, there's no reason why the organizations producing commercial master specs would not have an interest in this to be able to promote common terminology. It would just go a very long way to helping improve the industry.
I actually tried to do that at one time for my firm, to list the common terms and explain how they were used. And it was used with some success in my previous office.
Okay. Developing specs in parallel with drawings?
What a radical idea.
Oh, yeah, but I've got an even more radical idea. What if the drawings were actually done when we wrote the spec?
Oh, no. I know.
Then,
See, you're looking at it from the outsider's viewpoint.
but then everything would be perfectly integrated.
See, if you're a team player like me, what I'm talking about is when the team gets ready to detail the curtain wall, we all talk about it a little bit and say, okay, and I say, okay, here's some standard terms, and then then the team go out and draw it, draw the curtain wall details while I'm busy writing the spec section, and we agree on not only the terminology, but what products should be used and so forth.
But Louis, I think I have someone here on my side on this issue.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got one comment here, and I can't make out who it's from, but the comment is all specifiers are outsiders.
Well, see, I've always tried to avoid that, being that funny little guy at the end of the hall.
Yeah, but see, does this slide say it? I mean, really? Who is the last to know?
Absolutely.
It's unfortunate, but sometimes that's really true. The specifiers are the last ones to find out what decisions the designers have made. So when you're making decisions, please let everyone on the team know, because it's going to benefit the project in the end.
Let's do our fourth polling question. Actually, why don't you back up 2 slides, David?
Back up 2?
Yeah.
I can do that.
There we go. And let's have that polling question number 4, please. There we go.
And I see a few
we're
comments
getting
there
some
also,
more
if you
comments
guys wanna
coming
see
in here
those.
too.
Ah,
Yeah.
good. We like that.
Okay.
I'm having trouble reading the questions. I'm only showing, like, for some reason or other, I can't get to show more than 1 line at a time.
Well,
You should be able to drag and
I
expand
keep stretching
that.
everything out, and it seems to work.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't. I'm trying that, but
Okay.
If you're
So
stretching
here
it, use the top.
to the polls, we had quite a few voted this time. Up to 85% of you weighed in on this. Does your firm coordinate the specs and drawings? And we've got 64% yes. Only
well, that's
9%,
encouraging.
yeah, only 9% are saying no, and 2% don't know. So the majority is absolutely yes, and if we include the sometimes, we've got a significant majority. So that is encouraging.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And here again, this is the issue of context. Is a lot of not only one of my concerns is that we draw more than we really need to draw, and I know that we note more than we need to note. So think about where is the right place to put the information that I need to communicate to the contractor. Don't put dimensions on a wall section that need to be on the plan where the guy laying out the walls can know how long to make the wall.
Okay. Louis, we have a comment from John Horner saying MEP terms is a common disconnect. The use of the mark used on the drawings can be used with the corresponding product in the specs is helpful. And I'm not sure where exactly you're thinking the disconnect is coming here, John, but if they have an equipment mark or a product mark on the drawings, oftentimes we're finding MEP is scheduling the product by the same mark. And while it may be found on the drawings, I think what you may be suggesting is that same mark is not carried back into the spec, and I would tend to agree with that.
That's like our expansion joint types example that I was talking about earlier. It's exactly the same issue because the mark is just a different word for type.
Right.
And this is kind of related to, I have 5 sons. I know very little about little girls, but I finally got, after 2 grandsons, I finally have a granddaughter who's 8 months old, so I might learn something in the next few years about little girls. But one thing that I've always told my boys is never use a word that you don't know what it means. And this is the same thing, is don't write a note that you don't fully understand. Ask somebody, so that, because you know, they might even have to change the detail a little bit if you understand what you're really noting.
I don't know how you could walk away from a note that you really don't know what it means. So,
oh, well, the brake metal
I'm sure it happens.
The brake metal example that I gave earlier, you'd be surprised how many people think that's an alloy, a special alloy of metal. They don't know that it means brake-formed sheet metal,
right?
And that you have to identify what material. Now David is going to tell us all about keynoting, but before he does, let's take the last poll question and find out how many people are actually using keynoting these days.
Okay. Yeah, this is me presenting keynoting is going to be a really lopsided here view. So anybody that wants to chime in on this, I'm happy to hear all sides. Okay, we have
this is an idea that kind of goes in and out of fashion over the years. You know,
right.
Every few years people will start doing it again, and then they get burned out on it and go back. With the advent of BIM making it possible, a lot easier to manage the numbers, we might see more of it in the future, but I don't know.
Okay, so we have 27% that never use keynoting, and the rest either frequently or sometimes are using keynoting. I think you're right, Lewis. With BIM, I think we're going to see more and more keynoting coming about, only because BIM is making the keynoting more accessible and somewhat manageable, because there's a central list. And
now we might.
Yes?
No, go ahead and finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, with the central list, at least we're able to know that the keynotes that are used are going to be consistent.
Yes.
Because you're only able to place a keynote that appears on the list. If it doesn't appear on the list, hopefully in this case, I'll call it the drafter, even though it's in BIM, would have to contact whoever controls that list to have the keynote added.
And we might explain that by keynotes we mean a system where we're not talking about like numbered plan notes where everybody uses that, but on wall sections, details, and elevations where numbered or alphanumeric designations completely replace all natural language notes, or essentially all notes.
Right. Yeah, and in this case, the natural language, I have a real difficult time as a specifier if all that I see is numbered notes on a drawing, because I am constantly having to go back and forth between a master list and the drawing to be able to understand the content of the drawing. And I think that actually hinders the contractor and his estimator too in the little bit of time that they have to put together an estimate. When computer memory was very expensive, using very shortened keynotes numbers made a lot of sense. Today it doesn't make as much sense, and if we can use the natural language for the keynoting, I think everything will be much better for everyone. The specifier, I'm actually working with several firms that are using BIM and very committed to BIM, and what we have tried to put together is a role for me as the outside consulting specifier. We're also maintaining these firms' master specifications for the firm, but we're setting these projects up so that we as specifiers will be the ones actually in control of the keynote list, that we will develop the keynote list based upon what we see in the model, what we discuss with the architect, turn the keynote list over to the BIM manager, and he will insert it into the model. And at that point, if anyone does need changes, they're having to contact us to be able to make the updates to the keynote list.
And do it right.
Right. And the advantage here is that with a little bit of effort on our part, the keynotes will actually match the specifications. So the advantage then of BIM software, if for some reason we make changes to the keynotes during the process, it can automatically update, and it can do it throughout the model. We don't have to go and find every instance, because it's really just referencing from a detail back to a list and replace the entry on the list, and the keynote is automatically updated.
So if you make a last-minute value analysis change from PVC roofing to TPO roofing, and that note is 100 different places throughout the drawings, the computer can do it quickly and exhaustively and not miss it. Well, that's the show for today, folks. And we
well,
really
I have a couple
you
more
coming.
questions. We have a minute.
Oh, good. We have a
right
minute
here.
too.
Yeah. I want to start with the last one from Dennis Elrod. He says, that's all well and good, but what about the keynote list that comes with Revit? Dennis, I've seen that list. It's exhaustive, and you really need to take a good look at that list and pare it down to what you're actually going to show on the drawings. As I remember, it actually had a keynote listing for virtually every different size and weight of wide flange. And I don't know of anybody that's actually, unless you're the structural engineer, that's labeling every wide flange in every location. So to be able to have the keynote calls out structural steel framing is probably sufficient for many of the details instead of getting into the specifics.
And that's exactly what we were kind of talking about earlier about being too specific in the notes, is that it's just not necessary. You know, if you're on an architectural sheet, you just point to it and say it's structural steel, and then the contractor knows that that's not miscellaneous steel in section 5005-5000, but it's part of the structural stuff, and to look on the structural drawings. You don't even have to say see structural drawings, just call it out as structural steel.
Okay. I have one more comment from Bob Johnson. You haven't brought up automation. In a previous firm, we created our own notation insert program that had a list coordinated with the firm's master specifications. That had options of use of keynoting. I believe this is also available with the current BIM software. Those systems were in coordination with the master specification system terminology. These could also include standard keynotes, at least based on a broad scope basis. And I do know what you're talking about, Bob. Again, we've had these conversations, and I think what you're suggesting, especially with the power of BIM, because most firms are barely scratching the surface with BIM, I'm sure that the kinds of things that you were doing previously are going to be almost commonplace, not this year, not next year, but several years out.
One of the things that's happening here at my shop, David, is that one of my functions is to maintain the spec masters, especially the architectural sections, and we have a new department set up, and part of the department will be the guys that set up the BIM and CAD programs for use by our firm. And so we're actually weekend after next going to be moving into the same location, so that I'll be right next to these guys, and we can improve that communication and get those standard notations worked out in advance.
Yep. Proximity helps. So, okay, we are at the hour, and I don't see any new questions. What I would invite you to do is, if if you think of anything and you have additional comments you want to make, you can always email Louis and me. We'll be happy to take your email and correspond that way. I will be creating notes of the session and posting that on our blog, and you're welcome to leave comments on the blog too, to be able to share with anybody else that may have attended or those just visiting the blog site. And Rob, you'll be posting, I guess, the recording of today's session. I've seen those go through the CSI web, or be available through the CSI website, so you can check there too. So we've enjoyed having everybody here with us today.
What are you going to talk about next month, David?
Oh, I've got something planned where we want to talk. Let's see, next month will be June 2nd. I want to talk about the specs must state the architect's intent. And I will leave it with that. And I say architect, think architect and engineer. I'll leave it with that, let you think about that, and we'll see if we can get some good discussion going next month. And I have asked Rob to send out a separate poll, and that'll be going out sometime next week. We want to talk about or get the group's reaction to how you're handling contractors' proposed products when those products are not specified.
And then we do also want, Dave and I really want very much for this endeavor to meet your needs. And so if there are subjects, topics that you would like for us to bring up for discussion, we'd love to hear from you. Please send those in, and we will give them deep consideration and see what we can do, because we want to help you do your jobs easier and better, and share ideas around.
Great. So thank you all very much for coming. We're over our time, and I don't want to keep you longer than you planned. So we'll see you next month, June 2nd, same time, 3 o'clock Eastern. Look forward to having you join us.
Yeah, thank you all. You may now disconnect.